hosting this conference today, and it gives us a chance to highlight and discuss the key issues on how we can transform the North, bring desperately needed transport funding and investment to the North, boost economic growth, and how we are just getting on with the levelling up. Just a couple of things just to mention first before we get going. Fire exits wise, there is no fire drill plan. There was going to be, but there's not now, which is good. But if you do hear any sirens, there are fire exits around this room, and there are in the breakout rooms as well that you guys will be going to later. And you just need to follow them to assembly points when that happens and if that happens. Okay, so with me on this opening panel, we have Martin Tugwell, the Chief Executive of Transport for the North, and we have Jamie Driscoll, our North Tyne Mayor, and the Shadow Secretary of State, Louise Haigh, is meant to be here, but she hasn't joined us yet. So hopefully, when we get going, Louise will be joining us. Okay, so there's plenty to discuss, a lot of headlines at the moment. One being that the UK's rail infrastructure is now ranked 29th in the world. I'm sure people noticed that one. We are still no further forward with the Northern Powerhouse Rail and HS2. However, there was an announcement this morning that the Northumberland line will reopen next summer, so it was good to see that announced earlier. Okay, so Martin, if you could kick us off with an introduction.
Thank you, Sophie, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And it's really a pleasure to be in Newcastle this afternoon, or this morning and today. This is our fourth conference as TFN, and I think it comes at a really important time, not just for TFN, but for the whole of the North, because as Sophie's touched on, whilst there has been progress made in the first 5 years of TFN, be in no doubt that the gap between the North and the South remains, be in no doubt that the size of the prize in the North remains a significant, over 100 billion extra in terms of GVA, if we can unlock the potential of the North, its residents and its businesses. And that needs investment in transport, in services, in infrastructure, but it needs that investment to be aligned with investment in other things, in terms of education, housing, energy systems. So it's a really important time for us to come together, a really important time for us to work together. And it's great to have our media partners, the Journal, the Chronicle Live, and also Teesside Live, working with us today at the conference, because getting the message out, one voice for the North, about the potential of the North, and realising that potential is what it's all about today. I'm going to be around along with many of the staff today in the various breakouts, so there'll be a chance, no doubt, to catch up in those sessions. And in the meantime, welcome to today's conference, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you throughout the course of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's great that Louise, you were able to make it. Hello. Jamie, do you want to go next?
It won't have escaped your attention as you were coming in, that vintage Rolls Royce in the lobby. I'm not sure that's the right tone for Transport for the North. I bought my first car when I was 18. I paid £300 in cash for a black Mark II Ford Escort. I used to have to park it on a hill so I could bump start it in the morning. And I went to a breaker's yard to buy a starter motor and fitted it myself. And actually thinking back, that's probably what started my trajectory to being an engineer. But that car represented freedom. I could go where I wanted, when I wanted. I could go and visit my girlfriend later at night. And when we talk about behaviour change, we will never compete with young love. That sense of freedom lasted until the end of the month when I had to fill up the tank. How much do we spend on private transport across the Northeast? In your mind, pick a figure. 2 million people are covered in the new devolved area of the expanded Northeast Devolution deal. Not freight, just personal transportation. Decide now, pick a figure. We spend £3 billion a year, most of it owning and running private cars. That's £1,500 a year for every man, woman and child in the Northeast, not including rail or road infrastructure. That's what we pay as private citizens. On servicing, new tyres, MOT, road tax, insurance, hospital parking charges and depreciation. We buy cars and we throw them away. We might think we're trading them in or selling them on, But collectively, we buy a car that costs half our annual take-home pay, leave it sitting on a drive while it depreciates, we get some use out of it, and then we throw it away 14 years later. Our houses don't lose money like that. And 96% of today's cars are still powered by fossil fuels. This is literally costing us the earth. So what's the alternative? Henry Ford famously said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses. 5 years after I bought that first car, which was nicked, by the way, I was studying engineering at Northumbria University, and I wrote a paper on what future integrated public transport could look like. Imagine a system that's based around people instead of vehicles, where the question changes from, is there enough parking, to how do we make the bus stop more comfortable? A single intelligent network covering the northeast from Berwick to Barnard Castle, where every bus has a transponder, so the passengers can see its location in real time on an app and be sure that it's coming, where we use that data for continuous improvement, where every traffic hotspot has a bus gate, so when the bus approaches, the traffic lights change and give the bus priority while the cars wait. Free Wi-Fi on every bus and every train, integrated with a Google Maps style navigation system with real-time data, where you can reserve a bike locker in town so you no longer worry about theft, where your account is keyed to your smartphone or smart card and automatically charges you the lowest fare. So once you've hit a price cap, you get unlimited travel for free, whether you switch between bus, metro, national rail, or e-scooter. And yes, you'll still be able to buy a day ticket with cash, so visitors from outside the region can use the network. Buses won't need to wait at bus stops while a driver sells tickets, so the journeys will be faster. People will feel safe whether they're 8 or 80, because we'll have guards on the trains. You'll be able to read your book on the way to work, and a smart system that will plot your routes for walking and cycling, and e-scooters and all forms of first and last mile transport solutions. Our villages and hamlets can have transport on demand. Half bus, half taxi, where you book your journey in advance, the computer calculates the best route and tells you when your bus will arrive, with live tracking information. No more standing in the cold and wet at a bus stop by the road, wondering if you've missed the bus. And you'll still pay the same flat fee as anyone living in the cities. And if you want to get away for the weekend or go to an away game, we'll have expanded car clubs where you can hire a car. And the entire fleet powered by renewable electricity or green hydrogen. And this is not a zero-sum game, by the way. Better public transport means a better deal for motorists. Who likes cruising around for a parking space? Who likes sitting in traffic jams? That stress of thinking, should I change lanes? Is the other lane going faster? Why do we do this to ourselves? Fewer cars on the road means a plumber with a van full of tools or a doctor on call can spend their time doing their job instead of sitting in traffic. It boosts productivity. We have 861,000 cars in the Northeast. 186,000 households own 2 cars. Now, if you can get to work easily or college easily, you can get your goods delivered, you can go for a night out without needing a car, why would you own 2? Thomas Edison famously said, "We will make electricity so cheap that only the rich will burn candles." Well, I'm saying if we make a public transport system so good, people will choose to leave their cars behind. A transport system where we're proud of the fact that we pay our key workers a good wage and give them the status they deserve. It's a good dream, isn't it? But can it be done? We've negotiated a new devolution deal for the Northeast. I knew we needed to. It was in my manifesto, written there in black and white. And all 7 of our local authority leaders understand the power that bus franchising can bring us. The power to take control of our transport system, where we decide what buses run and when, and what the fares are, and the specifications of the vehicles, as part of one total network. We've got to pay for it, but it'll cost a lot less than the £3 billion a year we're spending on cars. Obesity costs the Northeast £1.4 billion every year. A few hundred extra steps a day will transform health outcomes. And we have to end the lost opportunities of people unable to get to the jobs and training courses that will boost their earnings and invigorate our economy. Lou Haig's already confirmed last year that an incoming Labour government will deliver Northern Powerhouse Rail in full, including reopening and electrifying the Leamside line. And that opens up the Wearside Metro loop, extending the metro from South Hilton through Washington to Heworth, making it quicker for the people of Sunderland to connect to the national rail network. And with land value capture, we can build new metro lines and lever in billions from pension funds into the housing and the clean economic growth along these corridors, just as we're already doing the north of Tyne along the Northumberland line, which we've had confirmed will be open next year. While we're talking about cost, what is the cost to future generations and our planet if we don't do this? 200 yards that way is the 4th Street Works, where in 1829, George and Robert Stephenson built the rocket. That rocket did not go to the moon, but it heralded the biggest public transport revolution this planet has ever seen. 20 years later, Queen Victoria opened the High Level Bridge, a masterpiece of Geordie ingenuity. By the mid-1950s, there were more than 7,000 miles of track across the country, including the Belmont Viaduct and the Durham Viaduct, which today we call the Leamside Line and the East Coast Main Line. And it's a sad fact that our region had more rail routes in 1857 than we have today. Our trains are unreliable, our buses fragmented, our cities choked with traffic, our transport system in chaos, and it's costing us a fortune. When I was an engineer and we were given a design challenge, make this product stronger and lighter and cheaper, never once did I hear anybody say, that's not possible. We loved those challenges. And as I look around this room and I see the planners and the engineers and the data analysts and the legal experts and the communications professionals, I see the skills and the passion that we have to deliver this. The job of your politicians is to say, we will put a man on the moon by the end of this decade. Well, I'm saying if I'm elected for a second term, this time as North East Mayor, we will build that total transport network. We are the heirs of Stephenson. The North will rise again and lead the green industrial revolution. We will rise to the challenges of the present and build a zero carbon, zero poverty transport system for future generations to inherit with pride. It's in our hands, colleagues. Let's do this. Thank you.
Brilliant, some great talking points, which hopefully we can delve into later on, because it'd be great to look at some of those further. Louise, would you like to do next?
Thank you. And thank you, Jamie, for that fantastic introduction and setting out your vision for transport across the northeast. For what it's worth, my first car was a bright yellow Citroen Saxo Scandal, and embarrassingly, it actually had my name in really quite large letters in the rear windscreen. I was a proper Sheffield girl racer back in the day. It's a pleasure to be here today to address an issue that has rightly come under much recent public and media scrutiny. I know many of us in this room and leaders across the North really battle to get the balance right between rightly raising the shocking state of our public transport system while selling our brilliant region. We know the current situation is unacceptable for too many people across the North, limiting our ambition and making us less than the sum of our parts. We know that our second-rate infrastructure is costing us dear through lost jobs and economic growth. But we also know that the North has huge strengths and is a fantastic place to do business, live, and to work. Ask inward investors to the UK what they look for, and they will say two of their top priorities are skills and connectivity. So when they experience or witness the daily fiasco on our transport network, there is no question that they think again. But the talent, skills, and ambition that has grown in the North, despite these challenges, is precisely why we and the next Labour government will invest here. For Labour, investment in transport is fundamental to tackling the twin challenges that the next government will seek to address. Delivering the highest sustained growth in the G7, driven by good jobs and stronger productivity in every part of the country, and accelerating towards net zero. We know that for every pound invested in infrastructure, the economy gets £2.80 in return. And we know the North has huge ambition waiting to be unleashed. We have 27 universities, including 8 of the country's top research institutions. Excellence in advanced manufacturing, world-leading innovation in zero-carbon technology right here in the North East. In short, we have the ingredients to win the race for the green industries of the future, but it cannot be delivered and it cannot be won without infrastructure that is fit for purpose. That is why Labour is determined to lay the foundations for the century ahead. It's why we have stood side by side with business leaders and pledged that the next Labour government will deliver Northern Powerhouse Rail and HS2 in full. That includes the eastern leg up to Leeds and that new east-west line through Bradford, Britain's youngest city, wider electrification and upgrades across the northern network from Liverpool to Hull and reopening the Leamside line. Because people across the North know that our east-west connectivity is every bit as important, if not more so, than north-south. But we understand that in this constrained economic climate, the case for this investment has to be remade. We have to demonstrate to the public the benefit of these new high-speed lines. Without the full eastern leg of HS2 through Sheffield up to Leeds, there is no such thing as Northern Powerhouse Rail. Without the eastern leg, the business case for HS2 would never have been made in the first place. Without the new lines of Northern Powerhouse Rail, we will not have the transformational improvements in capacity and time savings that will help create the regional network that the North deserves. This investment must be a down payment on the century ahead. It's a down payment on the British supply chain that will build a rail network we can be proud of. And it's a down payment on the good green jobs of the future that will help spark a northern renaissance and put us in the driving seat for the years to come. But regrettably, leaks, briefings and rumour about the future of HS2 abound. Every week, a new story is briefed about ministers getting cold feet and plans to slash it further still. As anyone who has delivered major projects will tell you, short-sighted decisions over delays only add cost in the long run, limit the business case, and curtail the ambition of the North. I say to government ministers, get on with it. Stop wasting taxpayers' money and deliver what the North has been promised. And if you can't or won't, Labour will. And ahead of our plans for this major investment, we will establish a partnership with industry to look at how we can deliver infrastructure faster, greener, and more effectively. This council will be tasked with growing the British supply chain, delivering British jobs, innovating on zero carbon technology, and delivering infrastructure by learning from our international counterparts. We will develop an infrastructure plan for the future to make clear our long-term ambition, demonstrate how we see connectivity as essential to growth, and give certainty to the industry to develop skills and crowd in private sector investment. But of course, the problems on our railways are not confined to infrastructure. Many in this room have voiced our anger and frustration at the unacceptable levels of service our operators like Avanti and TransPennine Express. I have been repeatedly clear that I do not believe TransPennine Express should keep its contract given its prolonged failure to deliver, but we are all acutely aware that the issues we are experiencing across our rail are the result of fundamental issues in the way it is structured. Our railways are in crisis, and I know many of us in this room are in agreement that it demands fundamental reform. The system that has prevailed for the last 30 years was supposed to bring greater efficiency and innovation. Instead, many costs have consistently risen faster than inflation, with taxpayers and customers having to foot the bill. This fragmentation has led to perverse incentives and absurd waste, as ministers themselves admit. 300 people employed full-time whose job it is to argue who is at fault when delays occur. 55 million different types of ticket, 75 different types of train in passenger service, imposing greater costs in maintenance, regulation and crew training, and very little competition. Since 2012, 2/3 of contracts have been awarded without any competition whatsoever. This broken system, in the words of a report commissioned by this Tory government, has led to an unhelpful degree of short-termism that stands in the way of cooperation. That's why many of us are in agreement that the railways need a guiding mind, under public control, run in the public interest, with a requirement to integrate the whole railway, to bring track and train together and to control the timetable. Many of us agree that such a guiding mind should balance national integration of the railways with the devolved transport authorities, ensuring that those who understand their areas the best have a say over decisions and that they can do so speedily and accountably. We agree that under the system, the Secretary of State should determine a long-term strategy and vision for our railways and be accountable to Parliament for it. They should not interfere into the day-to-day running of the network, but give rail professionals the freedom to deliver it within an accountable framework. We agree on the need for fare reform and simpler ticketing. Yet the government's proposals will entrench fragmentation, not end it, needlessly tying the system up in a complex web of potentially dozens of train operating companies, each with their own incentives, structures and interests, diluting accountability, adding complexity and missing the opportunities that come from simplification. Now, we are clear that governance of the railways is not an end in and of itself. When Labour commits to bring rail operators into public ownership, we do so because we believe this model will best deliver a rail network that is simpler, better integrated, and better for passengers. That unified system will operate under an arm's-length body that aligns incentives across the industry, streamlines and hastens decision-making, and works cooperatively with local and devolved powers. To achieve that, we must give frontline professionals the freedom to do their jobs, incentivise innovation and long-term decision-making, and reward productivity improvements. And it must be accountable to passengers, to communities, and to Parliament. In short, it should be a modern public service. Now, in closing, I would say, absolutely inevitably, I have committed the same sin that everyone does across the transport industry and focused my speech almost entirely on rail. So let me conclude by saying that buses matter. They are the lifeblood of local communities, indispensable for connecting people to jobs, opportunities, education, public services, friends and family. And just 2 years ago, the previous Prime Minister promised services so frequent you wouldn't need a timetable. But in the last year alone, we have lost more than 1,000 services across England. Each one of those represents people cut off from their loved ones, from the ability to get a better job or further their education. Our broken bus system is failing passengers. Almost nowhere else in the developed world allows bus operators the power to set routes and fares that communities depend on. For years, people have said we need to fix it. Labour is already doing it in power through our brilliant mayors, handing communities control of their own bus services. And Labour in power will reform the broken system, will extend that power and control of local bus services to every area of England that wants it, will put power back where it belongs, in the hands of the communities that have seen it drift away for too long. Because if the North is to truly fulfil the incredible ambition of people here, if we are to win the races for the industries of the future, power needs to be in the hands of towns and cities across the North. Our ambition to lead the world in the green industries of the future, from wind power in Grimsby, green steel in Scunthorpe, to the gigafactories and hydrogen plants that will power for years to come, cannot be delivered without transport fit for this century, that connects high-skilled workers right across the North to jobs and opportunities, that attracts investment, that helps rebuild those communities written off by Westminster for too long, and restores a real sense of pride. Critics say it is not possible to bring good jobs back home, But where is it written that the North and Britain cannot lead the world in these green industries of the future, just like we did the last? Some nation will lead the world in offshore wind. Why not this one? Some nation will win the race for electric vehicles. Why not us? Some nation will be the first to harness new hydrogen power. Why not Britain? Working together, I know we can deliver this exciting vision for our country. So let's get on and build it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, we've still got a bit of time to kind of discuss some of this, I think, a bit further. And one thing I wanted to bring up first, obviously, being on my patch, is the Leamside line and the expansion of the metro. As you've both said, there's been back and forth on this so much over the years. There's been promise, which has then obviously not come through. Jamie, what do you think now? How important is this to happen, and what impact do you think the devolution deal can have on this potentially coming back?
The devolution deal, which I've been working on for since I was elected, it's happened and it's real and it's going ahead. And with it comes capital funding, but more importantly comes the unity of the region, and that speaking with one voice is very, very important. There's all sorts of ways to fund this. There's direct government funding. There's other ways of levering in cash, because along the Leamside line, there is massive economic potential. So why can't we work with pension funds to say, put some in, we'll build a line together as a partnership with all of these economic benefits. And we've already done that with the Northumberland line, by the way. We can get those powers backed by central government and not just what we're doing ourselves. Then these things actually become self-funding. That's the value of things like land value capture, which Transport for the North now backs. I've been whispering in a lot of ears for the past few years on this. So it is, there's the transport engineering, but there's the financial engineering that goes with it. Now, what does it do for people? Which is what really matters, putting people at the heart of this. If you live in South Hilton, it's a hell of a journey to get to Newcastle on the metro. So there's that temptation to drive. But if the metro goes the other way as well, through Washington, on part of what is the Leamside line, we start to get to that critical mass. And that's why I use the phrase total transport network. Imagine if only half of the people you knew had email. Email, no one would use it. It wouldn't do its job. If only half of the shops took a debit card. Once you get to that saturation point, that's when networks come into their own. That's what we've got to get to.
And how hopeful do you feel now? What do you think needs to happen next to kind of keep this being talked about and to get it moving?
It needs, ultimately, someone to say, we are going to do this. And I'm saying we are going to do this. Then all of the experts, all of the professionals, and we've got some great professionals in TfN and Transport North East, and I see people from Sustrans and other organisations here. They know what they're doing. And to put an appropriate metaphor in, what they need is a green light.
Yeah.
So that's how we do it.
Definitely. Martin, is there anything you want to add on that?
I think what Jamie is highlighting, and indeed Louise touched on it in her speech there, it's about empowerment, it's about devolution, and it's about investment. And I think what we've got in the north is we've got really fantastic examples of where we're already pushing at those boundaries. We have the devolution to the metro mayors. We have a degree of devolution on rail with the Rail North Partnership. But what's obvious is about if you empower communities and organizations to do things, to bring together the thinking that places investment in a place for people, that's where you start to get momentum. That's where you start to get success. I think the Northumberland line is a really good example of how a slightly different way of doing things, you can start to get ideas turned into reality. And as Jamie says, I think there's an opportunity here to push some of the reforms that we need, not just in rail, but in transport more generally, and say, we're here, we're doing some of this already in the north, and we want to do more of it, and we want to work with government to make that happen.
Great. Brilliant. Okay. The next thing I wanted to kind of bring up and discuss is rail fares. obviously, this is something that a lot of people talk about as a big issue at the moment. People are saying they're paying far too much for a service that is not good enough. I know that this morning a lot of people have struggled to get here. If you just look at the hashtag for this conference, a lot of people have struggled, obviously with potential, well, the weather was meant to be quite bad this morning. Is this a really bad situation that people are having to deal with right now?
It's a ridiculous situation. Rail fares and bus fares and petrol costs and a general cost of living crisis all compound and exacerbate each other. We have to think about the economics of this differently, because what happens is people look at the cost of a single section of line and running a single train, and we never think about the cost of not actually having a transport system. That's why I was going through the figures. We spend a fortune on transport, and we spend a fortune fixing the problems that bad transport causes us. Rail fares should be lower. And not only that, rail fares should be comprehensible. Because if you turn up and try and get on the train, well, who just jumps on a train? Certainly around here. You wouldn't, would you? You'd get fleeced, and you know you would.
Yeah.
So you've got this complicated, we shall I book an advance super single return decaf latte ticket? And no one understands what they are. So how about we go for a system of rock-up transport, where we just say, look, the computer says yes, not no, and it knows what it is. And you know what? How about we have the idea of mobility as a service with a fixed cap on it, so that once you've spent a certain amount in a year, you can go anywhere for free. We get 1 million people on that system, we can pay for wherever we want in the Northeast.
Martin, do you think that would be a good system? Would it work?
I think the thing that strikes me at the heart of what Jamie and indeed Louise was talking about earlier was changing our attitude, changing our approach. Instead of thinking about what's the investment in this particular mode of transport, thinking in terms of what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve, not just in terms of transport, but actually more fundamentally in terms of the economy, in terms of society, in terms of the environment. We know from the work we've done as TFN, which is underpinning our revision of the Strategic Transport Plan, which you will be able to comment on later this spring. We know that the size of the economic prize is something in the order of £118 billion a year. We know that we have to accelerate the decarbonisation of our transport system as an economic opportunity, because the investment in the technology that will help decarbonise is actually the technology of the 21st century. And when we published our work on transport-related social exclusion last year, we identified that over 20%, that's over 3.3 million people, already live in places where they are either unable to get access to services or opportunities or unable to afford it. And actually, that's not to suggest it's okay everywhere else, because every part of the region, there are challenges. So I think if we start thinking in terms of outcomes, we start thinking in terms of what that means in a place, we can start to join up in a place to make it better for the users. And I love little anecdotes and the kind of thinking I'm talking about. I was talking to a very eminent transport professor who reminded me that once, a few years ago, a National Health Service Trust asked and paid for a local authority to grit the pavements, because gritting the pavements was a less costly expense than having to deal with all the broken legs and the broken hips that come as a consequence. That's a simple thing, but it's joining up thinking in terms of the people and the places and what are we trying to achieve.
Absolutely. Great. Okay. I mentioned before as well that the UK's rail infrastructure is now 29th in the world. I think that's gone down from 19th. What would your message to the government be with that stat?
It's a really simple answer, actually, Sophie. Why can't we be first? There's no reason we can't. But you know what? I'm not bothered so much about being first. I'm bothered about it being good enough to do what it has to do, being the best it can be. And if the rest of the world is also brilliant, you know what? I'm quite happy with that. So how do we do it? Well, we have to get an integrated system. It will only happen. It's that Thomas Edison quote, isn't it? We will make electricity so cheap that only the rich will burn candles. We will make transport so good that nobody will choose to own a car. and it has to be all aspects of the system. When you do that, it saves you a fortune. So we've got to start thinking about this in terms of investment, in terms of a down payment on a prosperous future, and stop thinking about it as day-to-day expenditure.
And I think the other thing for me, it reinforces the importance of having the North single voice on these issues. I have to go up to London for quite a number of meetings, and what really strikes me is the narrative that sits around rail at the moment. The narrative for me is quite often driven by people's experiences in London and the Southeast. And I listen to those comments, and then I think about when I'm standing on the crowded platform at Leeds waiting for a train to take me back across to Manchester. And you see the trains coming in full and standing, and you see there's a full platform. And then you think, Leeds Station, it's the third biggest source of delays on the entire rail network. The entire network, not just the North, the entire network. The arguments about investing in rail, we know we need to plan to grow the railway in the north, to connect the great towns and cities, to be able to realise their economic opportunity, but also to be able to enable people to shift, to actually use the trains between those cities so that we can hit those decarbonisation targets. And I think it's about focus on that. It's about coming together as we are today, having that single voice about the importance of the investment and saying the narrative in the North has been and always will be different, and empower the North to actually make that case and to be able to make the investment choices that will deliver success.
Absolutely. I think what you're saying there about a single voice for the North, and an event like this with so many people here really pushes that voice more for the North. So what outcomes would you like to see from today?
What I would like to see today is that everybody goes away with a different narrative, because the narrative, entirely understandably, has been Northern Transport is crap.
Mhm.
And Lou's been through the reasons, Martin's been through the reasons, I've been through the reasons. Our trains are unreliable, our buses are fragmented. There's a lot of places you don't even get a bus. And our cities are choked with traffic at the same time. But rather than thinking what's wrong, let's start thinking how we fix it.
Yeah.
And let's start thinking not how do we fix it in 3 months, but let's think about the way that Stevenson must have thought. There is a different way to do this. And it requires that conceptual thinking in the finance and the communications and the ownership structures. All of that has to change. It's not just physical engineering. And there's a load of people here with a load of skill. That's the point of today. It's the network of all our brains together that's going to get us there.
And for me, Sophie, it's about coming together as one voice for the North, that commitment to make the case, to continue to make the case. And as I touched on earlier, I think it's about saying we're ready to be empowered. We want more devolution. And by working together, we'll unlock the investment, both public and private. Private investment has a really important part to play here, but they are looking for that sense of direction, that vision, that ambition, and that sense of opportunity. And I think we can take away today the real sense that now is a time for hope and optimism.
Fantastic. Great. Well, let's hope there's plenty of that today. So now there's going to be some breakout sessions in some of the rooms. We're going to be joined later by the Transport Secretary in our afternoon session. So that should be great to put some of this to him as well. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie.